In this video, we'll be looking at Chapter 8, Section G on measuring the spread. Let's take a look at a few simple data sets. Both data sets have 9 numbers, and we can see that the median of the first data set is 6, and if we calculated it out, the mean or average would also be 6. And in the second data set, we see that the median is 6, and the calculated mean would also be 6. So both of these data sets have the same measures of center. With the exception of the mode, of course. However, if we take a close look, we see that the first data set covers a wider range of values. Its minimum is 2 and its maximum is 10, whereas the second data set covers a smaller range of values with a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8. So the measure of center doesn't tell us everything that we need to know about a data set. And in fact, in this case, we've illustrated that we have different minimums and maximums. Therefore, we have different spreads of data. And the spread of the data set is really the difference between the maximum and the minimum data points, which we call the range. And actually that's one way that we can measure the spread. There are 3 ways that we can measure the spread of a data set. The first is the range. The second is the interquartile range, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment. And then the last is standard deviation, which we'll save for another video. So when measuring the spread, we need to know some of the terminology here. So the first term that we need to know is the range. And the range is simply the maximum data value minus the minimum data value for a given data set. For example, if I have the following data set, the max value is 6 and the minimum value is 2, so 6 minus 2 gets me a range of 4. Remember that the median splits a data set in half, while the lower and upper quartiles do the same thing for the lower half of the data and the upper half of the data. So the lower quartile is the middle value of the lower half of the data. And so in this case, we need to find the median first, and then we can split the lower half of the data set again to find the lower quartile. So, and we call the lower quartile Q1. And this value, if we know this value, we know that 25% of the data is less than Q1. Similarly, the upper quartile splits the upper half of the data. And we call this value Q3. And likewise, 25% of the data has values greater than Q3. Once we know Q1 and Q3, or the lower and upper quartiles, we can find the interquartile range, which is a lot like the regular range for the data set, but instead of using the max and the min, it's simply the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. And we often denote the interquartile range as IQR. So let's take a look at an example problem. Here we have a given data set, and we're asked to find the median, the lower quartile, the upper quartile, and the interquartile range. So the very first thing that we need to do is order the data set. From this data set, I can see that I have 15 data points, and so remember that the median is the middle data point. So we take 15, we add 1, divide by 2, and so I know that the median is going to be the 8th data point. So I count over 8 positions from the left-hand side of the data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I know that the median is 5. Then I'm going to split the lower half of the data again to find the lower quartile. Now, because we've already used the median, or the median is a data value, it's one of our data values, we ignore it in our calculations for the lower and upper quartiles. And we can see now that we have 7 data points in the lower quartile, and we have 7 data points in the upper quartile. So we're going to split the lower quartile again. It's pretty much finding the median for the lower half of the data, and we want to find the middle data point, or the 4th data point in this case. So the lower quartile, or Q1, equals 3. And likewise for the upper quartile, we split the upper half of the data again, and we see that the upper quartile, or quartile 3, is equal to 7. Once I know those two statistics, I can quickly calculate the interquartile range, which is simply Q3 minus Q1, which equals 7 minus 3, or 4. And I know the question didn't ask for this, but to be thorough, let's find the range of the data, which remember is the maximum minus the minimum. Again, since we've ordered the data, I know the max and the min. I find the difference, and the range of this data is 7. Let's take a look at one more example. Again, we're given another data set, and we're asked to find the median, the lower and upper quartiles in the interquartile range. So just like the last problem, the first thing we're going to do is order the data set. And if we do a quick count, we see that we have 20 data points. So the first thing that we're going to do is calculate the median. And in this case, because I have 20 data points, my median is not going to be one of my data values. Right? It's going to be the average of the 10th and 11th data points. So if I count 10 spaces over, I see that the 10th data point is a 6 and the 11th data point is a 7. So I want to take the average of those two. And my median is 6.5. In this data set, the median is not one of my actual data values. So in this case, I'm going to split the data in half, not including or not crossing out one of the values like I did in the last example. And you'll notice that I now have 10 data values in the lower half, and I have 10 in the upper half. So again, I have an even number. Therefore, to find the median, I need to take the average of the middle two numbers. Well, the middle two numbers in the lower half, to find the lower quartile, we need to take the average of two numbers. And the middle two data values for the lower quartile are 4 and 4, so the average of those is 4. And for the upper quartile, the middle two data values are 8 and 9. So the average of those two values is 8.5. And again, once we have these two values, I can quickly calculate the interquartile range by just taking the difference. So in this case, the interquartile range is 4.5. Now it's important to note that if you're going to be calculating quartiles using computer software or even some calculators, that they use different methods to calculate Q1 and Q3. So you need to know what method your calculator or the computer program like Microsoft Excel you're using so that you're calculating these values correctly. And again, to be just completely thorough here, when we're measuring the spread, we're often looking at the range of the data, which again is the max minus the min, so in this case 13 minus 1, or 12.